Hi everyone, I'm Professor Tech, and today we're talking about the not-so-sequel yet sequel to the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally X. What do I mean by this? Well, with the recent release of SteamOS, as well as a slew of rapid updates to make improvements, this very well may be the best Steam Deck experience I've ever had. And with that said, let's jump into it. It's no secret that the device that gave my channel the initial ground to start growing was Valve's first foray into the handheld gaming market, the Steam Deck, and I absolutely loved it. But for some time now, I've been ready for the next big thing, and while in the past I've mentioned things like Bazzai and other alternative handhelds you could look into, I think this is the first time I'm fairly wholeheartedly recommending a product. Not as it comes out of the box, mind you, but with minimal tinkering, and I do mean minimal, you can have the best Steam Deck experience out there, well, on the ROG Ally X. Blah, blah. While this video may retread some ground that I've already covered in previous videos in terms of the awesome upgradability of the Ally X, it will more so focus on how those features, when ported over to a Steam Deck experience, make all the difference in the world for an amazing on-the-go and at-home experience. So, without further delay, here come my top 5 reasons I recommend the ROG Ally X as your preemptive and unofficial Steam Deck 2 console. The screen. One of the biggest downsides to the Steam Deck 1 is, unfortunately, its age. While at the time of its release, many portable handheld PCs were already running 1080p screens, most of them lacked the horsepower or the wherewithal to have a decent OS experience and were either crappy in so many other areas or just so cost prohibitive that the average consumer just couldn't dream of getting their hands on one. So the only other real competitor in the handheld gaming space at the time was the Nintendo Switch OLED, which featured a richly colorful and still amazing display, albeit at 720p. So out of the gate, the Steam Deck 1 had virtually matching screen specs, although not quite as nice and vastly more powerful core running its games. In fact, it famously has been able to emulate Nintendo Switch games at even same or even better quality than the Switch itself, along with everything else that a handheld gaming PC could handle. But within a year or two, more competition started to quickly hit the field. The original ROG Ally had a 1080p screen of 120Hz and in fact the same screen as the ROG Ally X, and a few other competitors such as Lenovo with their Legion Go featured even higher resolution displays with stunning color replication, especially for a non-OLED panel. And of course you wouldn't be running any games at specs higher than about 1080p without massive slowdown outside of super low demand titles in some esports games. So, immediately, the ROG Ally X's screen allows us to have a much better experience at full 1080p with the horsepower to back it up and play games at that resolution. And of course, there's still improvements to be made since any high demanding title will have their settings turned down to medium or even low to make the frame rate playable. And even then, you could just turn the screen down to 720p and get more frames, so it's kind of the best in both worlds in a way. And yes, the Steam Deck OLED and the Switch OLED, for that matter, do in fact have a better display in my opinion. The color replications and crispness of image that OLED gives affects the received resolution that our eyes perceive. So of course my wish list item for the literal Steam Deck 2 when it really comes out, and whatever the next iteration of the ROG Ally is, would be to have a 1080p OLED display. Will it cost a fortune? Yes, but I'll just sell a kidney and it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Jokes aside, once the new Xbox versions of the Ally and Ally X come out, I hope that the following year's model will feature an OLED screen. In the meantime, the Ally X is the best portable screen for the SteamOS experience, in my opinion. And speaking of other things that it's the best SteamOS experience for, storage. While the Steam Deck features the ability to upgrade its internal storage, it is unfortunately limited to the much smaller NVMe drives that, to my knowledge, have very limited storage capacities. And even if you were able to find one on the more edge case sides of the internet, the Steam Deck only supports up to 2 terabytes of internal storage drive for its motherboard. Unless this has changed very recently or it's missed my radar, the Steam Deck is limited to a 2 terabyte internal storage drive and up to a 2 terabyte micro SD card. And this comes out to a cumulative total of about 4 terabytes of actual usable storage. And for more modern titles, you likely don't want to be running those off the micro SD card anyway because the load times would be abysmal. However, with the ROG Ally X, you're able to put a full-fat NVMe 2280 M2 drive inside with support for up to 4 terabytes of internal storage. You can then also combine this with the same 2 terabyte micro SD card, giving you a total of 6 terabytes of total storage on the go, and in total, a 2 terabyte storage difference, while hosting that 2 terabyte difference on the much faster internal storage medium. But some of you might be asking, who really needs that much storage? And my answer to you would be, well,
me, you absolute belligerent fool.
Memes aside and all that seriousness, people who travel a lot or commute a ton would really enjoy the benefits of having their entire library at their fingertips without the need for a constant internet connection to consistently swap titles in and out of installation. Couple that with the ever-increasing file sizes of more modern games, even if you're not using those high-res textures, and it doesn't look like the smaller storage mediums are about to get any more popular anytime soon. I myself travel for my day job responsibilities quite often, and so I sincerely appreciate being able to have all of my current console titles available, along with a micro SD card with all of my ready to emulate games available too. In addition, it helps me keep organized since all of my retro games will run just fine off the micro SD card, and my more modern games can run off of the faster internal storage. What this means is that I don't have to start mixing Steam installation locations on the same storage medium, and I can keep my retro titles and my more modern titles nice and tidy and separate, which for me, I just like having. A more technical aside to this point is that how much easier it is to upgrade the storage on the Ally versus the Steam Deck. While it's not expressly more difficult, it is just marginally so, and so a technical point goes to the slightly more simplified process on the Ally X for just how easy it is to get in there, pop out the old drive, put in the new one, as compared to the Steam Deck, which is only minimally more difficult, but still a little bit more. In addition, the extra storage capacity also leans a great favor to my next point, which is dual bootability. Yes, the ability to dual boot OSs is fairly common in devices these days, particularly portable emulation handhelds among many others. But the fact that the ROG Ally series of consoles were originally designed to run current Windows installs out of the gate means that the drivers and required pieces of software to make things run smoothly are inherently built into the ecosystem of the ROG Ally X. But Steve, this whole video is supposed to be about how the Steam Deck / SteamOS experience is on the ROG Ally X. And yes, that's true, but the Steam Deck also technically can have Windows installed, so I'm talking about this more so as a comparison of the Steam Deck versus the Ally X, taking into consideration that the Ally X can now run proper SteamOS. In the past, there was a degree of unfair comparison in this regard, but now it is a fully fair and full-fledged comparison, since both consoles now have native support for both OSs, so don't at me.
Don't know, I've gone cross-eyed.
Without rehashing too much of what has already been rehashed to death on thousands of YouTube videos already regarding the subject, being able to run both Windows and SteamOS gives your consoles the ability to run games that don't just work natively on Linux or that don't run that well at all using the Proton compatibility layer. The Proton compatibility layer converts the code language games designed for Windows in real time, making many games mostly or even fully playable on a Linux-based ecosystem such as SteamOS. In the simplest of terms, it translates things in real time. However, there are some limitations to this, and as of writing, there are still a lot of games that just don't work natively on Linux, or by using the Proton compatibility layer, there's just problems. There can be several reasons for this, such as the infamous anti-cheat, anti-compatibility aspect that developers themselves have to account for, or there just isn't a translation compatible call or object code yet that they can make work on Proton. There's a lot of different reasons it doesn't work, so there are some games that are unfortunately just locked to the Windows ecosystem at the moment, and so being able to dual boot is very beneficial for people that like to play those titles on the go, but still want that console experience most of the time. This is cool though, because with the wider release of SteamOS, there is a clear message being sent that more and more games will become compatible over time, as Valve effectively doubles down on their commitment to making SteamOS an everywhere platform. And because of this, make sure to get subscribed, as I will be covering additional developments of SteamOS, as well as some cool side projects where I might try and install it on an older device to maybe see what I can get working. Maybe I'll even consider making a full-fledged 4K living room PC console experience and let you know what parts to get. So get subbed to get notified in case I do that. I won't promise anything, but maybe, who knows, perhaps. And to that point of making SteamOS an everywhere platform, docked mode. Yes, the true era of a Switch-like experience for PC handhelds is finally here, or at least just around the corner. Being able to play games at a consistent frame rate at 1080p, thanks to the extra horsepower of the Z1 Extreme chip along with the 24 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM, is a huge upgrade over the Steam Deck's 1080p choppy frame rates or the horrible image quality that you get whenever you scale something from 720p up to 4K, which is what most moderately sized home TVs are these days. And don't get me wrong, being able to do dock mode with the PC portable handheld at all is great, but the scaling quality of 1080p to 4K is just so much better. The integer scaling comes off cleaner with better fidelity and less blurriness, and when you crank the Ally's X's CPU power delivery up to 25 watts, getting a smooth 50 to 60 frames per second in most games at medium to low settings is totally possible. And on another note, up until now, I've truly not enjoyed the dock mode experience of things like Bazzite, and while 95% of the time it works, there are just enough times where strange issues pop up like my controller losing recognition or the OS prioritizing the handheld controller over my Bluetooth controllers at seemingly random intervals, or it just plain doesn't recognize my controller at all. It makes it just annoying enough occasionally to make me not want to engage with it. It's not as pick up and play. But don't get it twisted, it's still vastly better than my Windows experience on handheld portables has been, even for the ones that are designed to run Windows, like the Ally X in its original form. It's just that I also have a Switch and a Switch 2, and those consoles just work. So I don't have to worry about all of those issues, and the Switch even has nice little quality of life features like being able to turn on your console with any connected Bluetooth controller. Combine that with the auto TV turn on effect, and your time from walking in the door from work to playing games can be just a handful of seconds. And as someone who's getting older and valuing his time more and more these days, little conveniences like these mean a lot, even if they're really just creature comforts at the end of the day. Also, let me address the people in the room about to say it. Yes, the Steam Deck OLED does support some controllers waking up the device from sleep, and this can create an effectively similar effect to the Switch. And no, as of writing, the SteamOS experience on Ally X doesn't support this feature yet. I'm unsure if it's the ability to wake from sleep from a Bluetooth controller, maybe a hardware ability that just has to be, physically put into the device, or if it's something that can be updated over software infrastructure. That would make the Ally X SteamOS Switch-like experience pretty near perfect in my opinion, but can't have everything. But I did get a little distracted there. The reason that the dock mode on the Ally X is so supreme is because we're getting true big picture game scope mode that can run at high frame rates on higher resolution displays without stutter. While the Steam Deck could handle 1080p in the menu just fine, I always found that 4K in the menu had just a little bit of jitter. Obviously, I didn't expect to play games on the Ally X, and especially not the Steam Deck at 4K, but I do like having my UI elements in my hub software to be tacked and sharp because it just makes the experience of using a device like that much nicer. A fairer comparison might be the Switch 1 versus the Switch 2's dock mode experience, and just how much better the image quality is in the hub with the overall new device as compared to the original Switch. And for something that I love having better image quality for and easy access to in dock mode handheld PCs is, of course, emulation across the nation. Finally, I can play many of my retro titles at super high frame rates at 1080p or even many older titles at 4K from the convenience of just one device. This includes consoles up to and including the PlayStation 3, which for me personally is one of the end frontiers of retro emulation. Most titles after the PlayStation 3 generation were eventually ported to PC, with of course a few exceptions that will always require the amazing work of porters and emulation software designers, so hats off to them. But in general, once we get that generation rolling at full capacity, that is pretty much the end game for a lot of people. Perfect PS3 and back emulation combined with natively running anything after that point, and you have a recipe for a handheld device that quite literally can play all of your games, and not just the ones from a particular library. With, of course, the exception of a certain set of consoles that have always found a way to break themselves if anything resembling the word emulation even starts to approach them. Speaking of the Nintendo Switch 2, hit the like button below if you'd like to see my review of it, talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the device, and I don't plan on doing anything to get on Nintendo's bad side, but I would love to give you my thoughts on how it compares to its predecessor and to the current competition out in the market, including that of handheld gaming PCs. You know you want to. To get back on topic, I love being able to play old games like Shadows of the Empire, Jak and Daxter, along with so many others that have been locked in time at high resolutions. Sure, textures will be textures, but it's so nice getting to see buttery smooth gameplay at higher resolutions with more refined polygons, and it's also really cool to know that everything can be taken on the go whenever I want. And for taking things on the go, get subscribed because I have a new little friend called the AYN Odin 2 Mini that I just butchered the name of, and it has become my favorite pocketable handheld. This little guy has been getting more play for me than any other device recently, and there's several reasons why. And I'd love to talk to you about them if you get subscribed. Otherwise, I won't get to talk to you about them, and then I'll be very sad. Very sad. So in short, with SteamOS now effectively fully supported on the ROG Ally X, I can wholeheartedly say I recommend just getting this console, installing SteamOS, and then gaming to your heart's content. The docked mode is fantastic, the storage upgradability is at the top tier portable handhelds, and it can of course still dual boot, has the widest support of emulation of any handheld, and the screen upgrade is just so much better than the classic Steam Deck, and even compared to the OLED depending on your preferences. I'm Professor Tech, thank you for watching my video, and I hope to see you in my next video. Later.